I hid something in my garden, and I believe it's time to share it with someone. That's what Walter Price confided in me, of all places, by the frozen vegetables. My shopping basket nearly slipped from my hands, right there among the corn kernels and potato puffs. His gaze held the weight of someone who'd waited years to voice a long-held secret. My immediate reaction was, this isn't what I came here for, just some canned fruit and a roasted chicken. Yet there we stood. Walter and I have lived near each other for nearly 3 decades. His house, one door down on Magnolia Street, has a weathered white fence, and noisy wind chimes, he claims, are tuned to an old traditional melody. We've swapped snow shovels, desserts, and weathered a few blackouts together, but heart-to-heart talks? Not our usual routine until this moment, it seems. He gave a small laugh after speaking, perhaps to ease the awkwardness or to see if I'd brush it off, letting him pivot to another topic. I didn't. I just gaped at him, as if he'd sprouted a second head. "You doing all right, Walter?" I asked. He nodded. "I'm okay. It's just been on my mind a lot. Can I walk you to your car?" We left the store with a quick wave to the cashier and stepped into the crisp, late autumn air. Frost coated the windows of my aging Subaru despite the daylight. Walter, ever the gentleman, wiped the ice off with his sleeve as I stowed my groceries in the back. He rested against the car's side, silent for a beat. "You remember my wife, Irene?" he said. "Of course," I replied gently. Irene had passed 7 years earlier, taken by a swift, cruel cancer that left everything reeling. Her laughter echoed in my memory. She'd bake the most delicious banana bread, leaving a foil-wrapped slice on my doorstep every Sunday. We weren't the closest, but we had a neighborly bond, waving from porches, sharing recipes, watching each other's mail during vacations. Irene asked me to do something before she got really ill, Walter said, his voice hushed, as if the empty parking lot might eavesdrop. And I did it. Never told a soul. Not our kids, not the preacher, not even her sister. I didn't pry, just let the silence linger, knowing it sometimes paves the way for truth. He rubbed his jaw. She wanted me to bury her wedding ring in our yard. Said it shouldn't be handed down, sold, or left in a box. It was ours, meant to stay where we built our life. My heart ached with the beauty of it. "That's lovely, Walter. She made me swear to it, and I kept my word. But now, I'm wondering if I should tell our sons, maybe show them where it is. They're not kids anymore," he continued, "grown with families, but I've kept it from them, and it's heavy on me now." His eyes met mine, seeking guidance. "What do you think?" I paused, watching a mother guide a cart with a wobbly wheel across the lot, her child singing off-tune. Life doesn't pause for hidden truths. "I think," I said thoughtfully, "promises evolve. If sharing this brings you peace and gives them a new piece of their mom, it might be time." Walter nodded, as if he'd already made up his mind but needed to hear it. "I didn't plan to spill all this today," he admitted. "You've always been easy to talk to, but this is something else." "Well," I said with a faint smile, "a bag of frozen veggies doesn't usually spark a heart-to-heart." He chuckled, the sound richer than I'd heard in ages. "Stop by tomorrow if you've got time. I'd like to show you where it's buried, just in case I forget or something happens. Someone ought to know." I agreed, feeling a mix of nerves and privilege. Why he chose me, I wasn't sure, but it mattered. At home, as I unpacked my groceries, I held the can of fruit longer than needed, lost in thought, not just about Walter, but about the things we all tuck away. Memories, regrets, unspoken words. We carry on, acting fine, until a moment in a store cracks us open. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of Irene, Walter, and my late husband, Tom, gone nearly 12 years. We didn't bury anything in the ground, but I'd stored plenty in the attic. Love notes, cards, the tie he wore on our last beach trip. I hadn't touched them in years. At dawn, I brewed coffee, wrapped myself in a scarf, and walked to Walter's. He was on his porch, thermos in hand, gloves on. Without a word, he handed me a mug and led me to the backyard. We stopped by an old oak near the fence, its leaves a vivid red in fall. He gestured to a small, heart-shaped stone. There, he said. We stood quietly, two neighbors with decades behind us and perhaps a few secrets left to share. This wasn't just about a ring, it was about what we hold dear and what we choose to reveal. The stone tilted slightly, settled into the earth over time. Walter knelt, more from routine than necessity, and brushed away some leaves. He didn't disturb the stone, just gazed at it, like recalling a familiar tune. I stood back, mug in hand, unsure if I should speak or simply witness. Irene chose this spot, he said softly. When the boys were little, we had a swing set there. She'd sit here with a book, pretending to read, but really watching them, soaking in their laughter. His eyes glistened, though he didn't weep. Not quite, but in that restrained way of his generation. I placed a hand on his shoulder, a quiet gesture of support. At first, I didn't get why she wanted the ring buried here, he continued, but I think she knew I'd need a place to return to. I nodded, letting the moment settle. Crows cawed from nearby wires, life humming along, untouched by sacred pauses. I've been reflecting, Walter said, standing with a slight groan, on how we measure a life, not by its length, but by the small things, the private jokes, the sound of her steps in the hall, her humming when she was lost in thought. I knew those kinds of memories. Tom had a habit of tapping his mug twice before sipping. I only noticed after he was gone, and now I do it unconsciously. We sat on his porch later, sipping tepid coffee, saying little. Walter draped a blanket over his knees, looking older, not just in age, but in the weight of his secret. After a pause, he asked, "Have you ever kept something like that? Something you never shared?" I stared at my mug. "I have a box," I admitted. "Up in the attic, mostly letters, a few photos, a receipt from the diner where Tom proposed." He smiled softly. "Why the receipt?" He misspelled my name, wrote Linda instead of Linda. He was so flustered, I couldn't toss it. "Strange, the things we keep," he said. "I used to think grief was something you endure, like a storm. But it's more like a house you live in. Some days you forget the walls, then you stumble and it hits you again." I leaned back, letting his words sink in. Grief wasn't about leaving it behind. It was about coexisting with loss. That afternoon, I went home and pulled the attic box down, dusty but whole. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, I opened it. There was more than I recalled. A napkin with our initials in ketchup, a card with a private joke, Tom's expired fishing license, his name still vivid in ink. I spent hours there, sunlight moving across the beams, reading, remembering. I thought of Walter's ring, Irene watching her sons, and how we all try to hold on to love's fragments. The next morning, a note waited on my porch. Walter's tidy handwriting. Linda, can you come with me to the cemetery tomorrow? There's something else I need to do. I went, naturally. The drive was quiet, just the soft hum of an old country station. The cemetery, 30 minutes away, lay behind trees, its gravel path crunching underfoot. Walter carried a small wooden box. I didn't ask what it held. He'd show me when ready. At Irene's grave, a simple stone read, "Loved deeply, laughed often." Walter stood, clutching the box like it carried a heavy burden. At last, he opened it, revealing a thin, worn silver band. "Mine," he said quietly. "If hers is in the yard, this belongs here." He knelt, slower this time, and set the ring by the stone. Not buried, just placed. "We made vows in life," he said, "but the ones we keep after might mean more." We stood in the breeze, silent. I thought of Tom, the attic box, and love scattered across time. On the way back, Walter said little, but smiled. At our street, he turned to me. "There's more to tell, but it can wait. I just needed to begin." I smiled. "You picked the right moment and the right person, Walter." He glanced at his house, then back. "Do we ever truly know our neighbors?" I pondered. "Not all at once, but bit by bit. That's how we know anyone." He nodded, waved, and went inside. I lingered in my car, thinking of rings, receipts, and truths shared over frozen vegetables. How the smallest acts, like keeping a promise or speaking a secret, can feel monumental. The next week, Walter was out in his yard more, pacing slowly, hands clasped behind him, as if studying something unseen. On Thursday, he brought a jar of pickles to my porch, claiming they were homemade, though the label said otherwise. I let it slide. His gesture mattered. "Got a question," he said, shifting on his feet. I set aside my gardening tools and invited him to sit. The porch swing groaned as he settled. "I've been thinking about Irene's sister, Carol," he said. "She never got real closure. We had the memorial, the food, the words, but I never told her about the ring. I'm not sure that was fair." Carol lived 3 states away, last seen at Irene's service in a blue coat, dabbing her eyes with a lace hanky. She and Irene were tight, though opposites, Carol all structure, Irene free-spirited. "She might value knowing," I said, "that Irene made such a personal choice." Walter nodded. "I want to tell her face to face. Thinking of driving up next weekend." I smiled. "That's a trek." He looked sheepish. "Was hoping you'd come along." I hadn't done a road trip in years, not since visiting a family friend with my sister. But Walter's expression said this was about companionship, not just travel. We set out Saturday at dawn. He brought coffee, a thermos, and foil-wrapped sandwiches. The drive was calm, the silence comfortable. Trees, bare from fall, lined the highway. Past the state line, he shared a story about him and Irene getting lost on this road. "She refused a map," he laughed. "We ended up at a pumpkin patch with a goat named Harold. She called it our greatest adventure." We reached Carol's tidy ranch house by mid-afternoon, its white shutters and mum garden welcoming. Carol's surprise softened into warmth when she saw Walter. "Well, look at you," she said. "Didn't come empty-handed," he replied, chuckling. She ushered us in with tea and apple pie. Her living room was orderly, with grandkid photos and a quilt on the sofa. We chatted lightly, but tension simmered. Walter cleared his throat. Carol, I need to tell you something about Irene. Her face tightened, wary. Okay. He shared it all, the ring, the promise, the stone. Carol listened, hands clasped, silent. When he finished, she paused, then nodded. Thank you for keeping her wish, and for telling me now. Walter's relief was palpable, like a burden lifted. She wanted to be remembered her way, Carol said. That's Irene, always bending the rules. We lingered, talking about little things. As we left, Carol hugged Walter tightly, then me. You're a true friend, she said. Keep him on track. The drive home was lighter. Walter hummed to the radio's soft twang. Back in my bed that night, I thought about how long we wait to say what matters. Years, decades, held back by fear or habit. The next morning, Walter arrived with a photo album. You've earned this, he grinned. You've heard more of my stories this month than anyone in years. We flipped through pictures on my porch. Irene in her church hat, the boys in costumes, Walter with hair and an ill-fitting mustache. He shared tales, some familiar, many new. I shared some too. We laughed, sometimes softly, sometimes startling the squirrels. Ever think about what's next? He asked. After the big moments, weddings, kids, losses, what's left is mornings, errands, porch swings. I nodded. That's where the real stuff is, the ordinary days. He agreed. We sat, mugs in hand, the album between us, this story still unfolding. Mid-November brought a sharp cold, the air crisp, hinting at winter. Raking leaves, I saw Walter at my yard's edge, in his tan coat and wool cap, holding a thermos. I dropped the rake and joined him on the porch. The morning was still, peaceful, but heavy. I've been thinking, Walter said, thumb tapping his mug, about what I leave behind. The boys are out west, busy with their lives, and that's good. But I wonder if I've done enough to make things easier for them later. I understood. Age shifts your focus to legacy. I want to write it down, he said. Not just practical stuff, like where the papers are, but the real things. Irene's whistle while cooking, how she teared up at baseball season's end. Things no one asks until it's too late. My throat tightened. You should. They'd treasure it. He looked at me. I want your help. Me? You're the one I trust to do it right. We began the next day, morning's best for clarity. He'd bring a notebook, I'd pour coffee. He'd talk, I'd write, about Irene, his sons, his childhood, his factory job, the shed he and Irene nearly split over. We laughed often, sometimes paused for tears. It became a ritual, a tender reckoning. One day, after writing about a treehouse he built with his boys, he looked at me oddly. You've helped more than you know, Linda. I smiled. You've helped me too. He pulled a tissue-wrapped object from his pocket. Inside was a smooth, gray river stone. Found this by Carroll's Creek, he said. It felt like Irene. Thought I'd keep it, but you're why I went. It's yours. I held it, warm from his coat. Thank you, I whispered. Winter hit hard, slowing everything. We traded soup and cards, waved across snowy porches. After New Year's, Walter's son Ben called. Dad's in the hospital, he said. Slipped on ice, broke his hip. I offered to visit, but Ben said Walter was mostly sleeping, and the doctors were uncertain. I went anyway 3 days later. The hospital room was soft lit, with a gray view. Walter, pale but awake, muttered, Should have skipped the mail. No outdoing your stories with falls, I teased, sitting. We lingered quietly. Before I left, he grabbed my hand. There's a box in the coat closet labeled Instructions. Give it to the boys. And Linda, keep the notebook. That's yours. He passed 2 nights later. The funeral was simple, family and a few neighbors. Carol, in her blue coat, hugged me silently. Ben and his brother thanked me for supporting their dad. I told them he'd done more for me. At home, I opened the notebook. The final page in Walter's hand read, Linda, if you're reading this, I've let go. Thank you for being my friend when I needed one. You showed me life still matters in its later pages. Keep writing. We need the quiet stories. Yours, Walter. I wept, not with raw grief, but with gratitude. A gentle farewell. I kept the notebook and started my own. The first entry wasn't about Walter, Tom, or Irene, but a bag of frozen vegetables and the unexpected confession that sparked everything. Because sometimes a neighbor becomes a friend becomes your story, and the smallest talks hold the deepest truths. That's what Walter gave me, and I'll carry it always.